The truth is that home prices have dropped in Gilbert, Arizona. And today we're actually going to look at it, see what's actually going on, and if it's something that we should be concerned about. And ultimately, if you are either buying or selling in Gilbert, Arizona over the next year, what does this really mean for you? How's it going to impact you? I am Courtney Strzelczyk. I'm a local real estate agent here in Gilbert. I live here, I eat here, I sleep here, I do everything in Gilbert. So I do know this city pretty well. And one thing I do want to know is when housing analysts or agents, real estate agents, are talking about the market, they're often talking about Phoenix Metro as a whole. But the important thing is if you're trying to keep up with market trends to figure out, the best way to save you money when you're buying or selling a home, it's important to look at the actual area that you're living in, because what's happening in Surprise is going to look very different than what's happening in Paradise Valley. And of course, what's happening in Paradise Valley is going to look very different than what's actually happening in our town, Gilbert. Now, I told you that home prices have gone down in Gilbert, but by how much? So if we actually look at this past month, the end of 2024, we actually see the median sales price. It's going to be $550,000. Compared to the month before, November, the median sales price was actually $610,000. So that's quite a bit of a drop. Now, one thing we do have to keep in mind are seasonal trends. And what I'm talking about is particularly around the holidays, we see a lot of things kind of come to a standstill, particularly between, Thanksgiving and New Year's. A lot of people aren't listing their homes because it's not a convenient time of year to do so. And then more so, a lot of people aren't shopping during that time period. They're spending time with family, they're spending time with friends. It's the holiday season. So it's not uncommon for us to see some sort of price reduction during this time of year, during the fall time, and even, January, February, because a lot of those homes initially went under contract during the holiday season. There's not as much competition during that time of year. But $60,000, that's a fair amount. That's more than what we typically see or have seen in prior years. Now, considering that we can see during this time of year some sort of price reduction because of the holiday season, a metric often people use is looking at your YOY, year over year. So this is basically looking at what happened December this year, 24, compared to December of 23. So that eliminates the seasonality that can impact home prices and really looks at the big picture of what is happening in the Gilbert market. All right, so when we're comparing this year compared to last year, what do we see? Well, actually, the median sales price stayed exactly the same, about $555,000. We didn't see any change whatsoever. Ideally, what we would like to see for, a steady, healthy market is the rate of appreciation matches or exceeds the rate of inflation. This past year, the rate of inflation, the national rate was about 2.5% to 3%, hovered a little bit over 3% for a few months. So we can see that the appreciation rate in Gilbert was actually less than the rate of inflation. So when we take a step back and look at the big picture of home prices in Gilbert, okay, it's not terrible. It's not appreciating at the rate of what we saw in, 2021, so forth. But what was the real reason we saw the price drop so much in this past month, and should we be worried? So in the last quarter 4 of last year, we actually saw there was an increased amount of homes for sale in the Gilbert area. And this actually, when you looked at the balance of supply and demand, this actually pushed us into more of a neutral market. So for the first time in, almost 10 years, buyers were starting to get more negotiating power when they were purchasing a home. And this was mainly because they had more options out there. But now it's January, we're out of the holidays. So what's going to happen? So typically we do see an uptick, particularly the middle of January. We see more homes listed. We see more people out shopping for homes. So it just increases the amount of activity. And usually what happens, it does become a slightly more competitive market. And that's actually what we've seen already. In the past, just the beginning of this year, we've exited that neutral market we were in, and we're actually in a seller's market, meaning that sellers do have somewhat of the upper hand. And we can see this by strictly looking at the supply and demand. Right here, I'm going to show you, this is a Cromford Market Index, and anything over 110 indicates that we are, in fact, in a seller's market. Now, the thing is, the Cromford Market Index right now now, it's 115.7. So that is very, very slightly above a neutral market. So it's really just a tiny little baby seller's market. So it's not like 21, 22, where sellers have all the power. But when you're really looking at supply and demand, they might have a little bit of the upper hand. But it ultimately comes down to what type of home, even the location of Gilbert. There's certain parts of Gilbert that are a little bit more competitive than others. Also, is it move-in ready? Is there a pool? There are a lot of factors that go into it and determining really who has the upper hand and how competitive of a home it is. Now, just like as I was talking about in the beginning of this video, that in Phoenix metro area, we have several sub-markets. We also have sub-markets within the city of Gilbert as well, and different areas do perform slightly differently and have different median sales prices. So for example, the central part of Gilbert, the 85233 area code, the median sales price there is $534. So that's a little bit lower than when we look at the median sales price of Gilbert as a whole. And this is the area like close to or west of downtown Gilbert. But if you go a little bit further north on the northeast side, like Val Vista Lakes area, that the median sales price there, that's actually the lowest area. It's $492. Head more central to Morrison Ranch, Agritopia area, the 85295 zip code. That's the median sales price there is $567. And then the Santan actually is $555, which is the exact median sales price of Gilbert as a whole. Now, as you go further south, the interesting thing I saw was that the 85297, this is the zip code directly south of the 202, that typically is one of the more expensive zip codes in the Gilbert area, but we actually saw the median sales price for December was $525. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Sometimes there are luxury listings. If there's not as many luxury listing sales, that can impact the median sales price in that area just because it's a smaller sample size. So we're going to feel that impact a little bit more than if we look at Gilbert as a whole. And then the zip code the furthest south, 85298, that is 715, and that is our actually most expensive zip code in Gilbert. Now, as I always say, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I were to make a prediction, my prediction would be that we should see the median sales price increase a little bit over the next couple months and probably recuperate from the drop that we saw in December. But stay tuned, subscribe, and I will keep you guys posted on what's happening in Gilbert, Arizona. Have a great day.